Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. There is a little bit more news from the intersection of Norse archaeology studies and Norse language and literature studies that a skeleton discovered in a well, actually discovered in the 1930s, that's about 800 years old, might in fact be the same person mentioned as being thrown down a well in a Norse saga. So, not an archaeologist, as I often point out, but rather a scholar of Norse language and literature, so I'm going to shed a little bit of light on what the saga story is behind this interesting discovery. Now, to begin with, many of the stories online about this have reported that this story comes from the saga of King Sverrir or Sverre, and the difference between those two names, they are the same name, but Sverrir is the Old Norse form, Sverre is the modern Norwegian form. So there's a very regular sound change in there. You see the same thing with many other words and names. But I've seen the two get mixed up in a lot of English language reporting about this. So while I can't speak very much to the archaeology or biology behind this, more or less a skeleton was discovered in the 1930s outside of Trondheim near the medieval fortification called Sverresborg. That's its modern Norwegian name. It's the castle of Sverrir, the fortification of Sverrir. So he had the Sverrir guy. Who is he? He in the early 1200s and late 1100s in Norway, there's a lot of regional conflict between different pretenders to the throne, different claimants to the Norwegian throne. And Sverrir is a guy who actually grew up of Norwegian extraction in the Faroe Islands, so between Shetland and Iceland, an area that still speaks a Scandinavian language today of its own called Faroese. And in his youth, it was revealed to him by his mother, whether for real or just as part of the legend, that he was in fact not the son of the laborer that he thought he was, but rather the son of a Norwegian king. And so he, who had been training to become a priest, instead went to the continent and allied himself with a faction in the Norwegian civil wars called the Birkebeinar, literally birch legs. These guys supposedly were so poor that they didn't have real pants. They had to tie birch bark to their legs to stay warm. And although this started out as a really ragtag group of not too many people, he turns them into an effective fighting force and eventually becomes sort of king of Norway. The thing is, there's a lot of rival factions. He never really controls all of Norway exactly. His base of power is around the region of modern-day Trondheim, so in the northwest, where he has rivals based in the Vik region, modern Oslo, and around Bergen. So Sverresborg, this fortification, is near the city of Trondheim. And a skeleton was found 21 feet down in a well there in the 1930s, covered by large stones. Now, where this intersects with the saga, I will tell you about in just a moment. Let me just give you a quick word in my usual fashion from my friends and partners at Grimfrost. All right, so the major competitors with Sverrir for the throne at the time of his life were a faction that the Old Norse text calls the Baglar, from Bagal, modern Icelandic pronunciation Bagat. This is a symbol of the bishop's office. I think it might be the crozier in English. It's just because they had more of the support of the church. So we read in the saga, chapter 111 of, at least in the edition of the text in the Flateyjarbók manuscript that I dug up, Baglar tóku feið það allt í borginni var en síðan brenndu þeir hvert hús þar var. Þeir taka þar mann inn dauðan og steyptu í brunnen, boru síðan í grjótar til fullur var. Now this is in 1197. This is after Sverre's power is largely broken, but they are the Baglar, the enemy faction, are attacking some of the remaining Birkebeiner at Sverreborg, and they just ruined the place. It says in the quote that I just read, the Baglar, they took all the money that was in the fortification and then they burned every building that was there. They took a dead man and threw him into the well, and then threw in stones until it was full. So the idea being, apparently, you throw in so many stones that it's just it's just too much labor to get this body out before it's rotten to the point that it's ruining your water supply. And that's apparently what is happening here. So, you know, in in this week's reporting about this in English language sources, you see the word Viking thrown around. I mean, this is well after the Viking Age, but it's still a period in Scandinavia when the brutality is maybe familiar from the Viking Age, right? People are just all out fighting their enemies. And of course, poisoning a well with a dead body. Apparently this guy wasn't killed to be thrown in. He was already dead, since it says they threw in a dead man, but still obviously a horrific, brutal tactic to harm your enemies who you've already taken everything from and burned every building of. So the Viking spirit, if you will, did not die out just because you know, the god that you're supposed to name in your prayers changed. One other thing I noticed in some of the reporting about this, that the genome of this man had been sequenced. I think that's what actually put this story into the news most recently, and that he was from a faraway district of Norway. He wasn't actually from the Trondheim area, the Trøndelag, which is interesting, right? It's just that in fact, like the saga suggests, there are people from all over Norway fighting all over Norway. So he might well be a member of one of the two factions who's been, you know, fighting or conscripted or laboring for one of the factions far away from home, which is in itself interesting. It reminds us that this is still a very mobile society by sea and by land, and being mobile by land in Norway is actually fairly difficult. It's a mountainous country like my own country. All right, well, if you're interested in reading Sverre Saga in translation or Old Norse, I will do what I can. I haven't been able to find a good translation that I know is available. I may be able to find something before I put this video up and put it on my Amazon shop, where your purchase can help this channel a little bit. If you'd also like to help this channel and its mission, my mission, to spread good information about Norse language, myth, runes, etc. without an agenda, you can support it on Patreon. You can also take some of my classes. I'm having a really good time teaching my Norse myth class right now. We're really attentively reading all the sources, the Eddas, etc., and really, really attentively going through them in translation with me pointing out what the original says and conflicts between manuscripts and things like that. That's a really great Zoom class, in addition to the Norse language Zoom classes that I've already been teaching before. For now, from beautiful Colorado, wishing you all the best.